Hi guys, welcome to Studio Wildlife. In this video I'm going to show you how I painted this wolf in acrylic paints. Here are some of the materials that I used for this painting. A 40cm by 30cm canvas, a 1-inch flat brush, a small angled brush, a round brush and a small detailed brush, a water bowl, an assortment of paints. I'll put a list in the description of all the colours that I used. The canvas and the acrylic paints were from the Arteza range. I've done another video reviewing them and telling you what I feel about them. To make things quick for myself, I traced my drawing onto the canvas and I refined it using a white chalk pencil. I only did this because I know I have the ability to freehand my initial sketches. And I'd already drawn out the same wolf in charcoal completely by scratch, so freehand, which you can see in one of my earlier videos. If you're just starting out learning to draw and paint, I don't really recommend tracing. You need to practice doing everything freehand and build up your observational skills, which help really in every single step of creating artwork. I started by blocking in the background using the 1-inch flat brush. I'm using very watered down acrylic paint here as I want the background to appear soft. I continue to build up the background with various light and dark greens, using some hints of light blue and white to imitate the light coming through the trees. I always start my wildlife paintings with the eyes. I feel like this is the most important part when capturing the life of an animal. Again, as with all my paintings and every single painting that I do, I work from dark to light. For the eye, I start with a very dark brown and build up the lighter colours with thin layers of watered down paint. And because I wanted this painting to appear almost magical, I added a touch of gold paint to the eye to catch the light and draw the viewer into that area of the painting. So next I moved on to the nose, and again working from dark to light. It looks like I'm using black here, but I never use pure black when painting these sections, as it tends to flatten the painting quite a bit. So what I do is add a little bit of blue to the black paint to make it look cooler when I want to paint the shadow areas, and a bit of burnt umber when I want the black to feel a little bit warmer. I use the tiny detail brush to add the speckles of light hitting the bumps on the nose. I don't use pure white for this either. I dilute it with a tiny amount of yellow paint as I want the light hitting the wolf to feel warm. If I wanted that light to feel cold, I would add in a little bit of blue. For the majority of the fur, I'm using the angled brush. Again, I start by adding very dark strands of fur as the base. This is where I pay attention to the direction of the fur and the length of each strand, because the lengths and the direction changes depending on which part of the wolf you're painting. So starting near the muzzle, they are very short and straight strands, but as I move further up the head towards the eyes and the neck, the fur becomes much longer and much wavier. I build up the lighter layers of fur on top of the darker strands using the same angled brush. I make sure to leave gaps in the lighter strands to make sure that some of those darker strands are showing through. It's really important to have some of those darker strands of fur visible in the finished painting if you're aiming for a realistic piece. So sometimes I'll go back in with the darker colours after I've finished to add more strands of the darker fur to give that effect of the darker fur underneath the lighter fur. Another big tip when painting realistic fur is to vary the direction of your brushstrokes. As you paint, you want to curve your brush in different directions to make sure that all of that fur isn't perfectly straight and all painting in exactly the same direction. Here, I'll show you what I mean. So you can see in the picture that the sketch where the fur has the darker strands showing through and the curved tips and edges to the hair, looks much more realistic. It looks much more interesting, more varied, and much more defined. If you'd like to learn more about painting realistic fur, Amber and I have more tips on our blog at studiowildlife.com. For the longer strands of fur around the neck and the edge of the face, I like to start with the round brush. I've had this brush a while, so it's started to fray a little bit, but I like the effect that this has, as it adds a little bit of randomness to the strands of fur that I'm painting. Amber doesn't really like to use this in her paintings. She prefers to have much more control when blocking in her fur. Another little tip about brushes, especially when you're trying to paint tiny details, is to make sure that you're using an undamaged brush. The frayed brush that I use is useful when I'm blocking in, but when I want to paint the tiny hairs, I use a new detailed brush for nearly every painting that I do. You don't want one that's starting to fray, because it'll put blobs of paint where you don't want them, it'll make it look messy, and it won't be as neat and controlled. Using that new brush gives me much more control of where I put that paint down, especially when I'm painting the tiny hairs. Using that damaged brush just gives you less control, and you could potentially end up with a ruined painting. You can read more about which brushes we use for painting fur on the website. I'll put a link to both blog posts in the description below. To finish off the painting, I use a glazing technique, which is just very, very thin washes of colour over the top of the painting, which artists use to alter the colours or add shadows to a finished painting. It's very rare that I get the colours of a painting right the first time, so I nearly always have to use glazing to correct those colours at the end of a painting. It's really important that you don't get too attached to what you've just made. More often than not, I end up repainting areas of a painting 3 or 4 times before I'm happy that they're done. So don't get too attached to what you've just painted. The fantastic thing about using paint is that you can just paint over any mistakes and change them really easily. Might take a bit of time to get them right, but you need to put time in to make a fantastic painting. So here's the finished painting. It's actually turned out to be one of my favourite paintings so far. If you like it too and you found the video helpful, please let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. We really appreciate it.